Hello, everybody. It is Romania Black, and we're on episode 15 of Moriarty the Patriot, The Phantom of Whitechapel, Act 1. Last episode was the end of the opening arc for the second cour. Irene Adler, she's gone underground, she's joined Moriarty, she's cut her hair off and changed her name to James Bonde, and why not? So we ended last episode with Sherlock. I think Sherlock, I'm recording a little bit ahead because of the holiday season, so I've not seen your comments yet for episodes 14 and 13 yet. I've seen your comments for episode 13, but not 14 yet. And so I'm not sure if Sherlock really believes that I think Sherlock realizes that Irene Adler is dead. That woman is dead, but the actual person herself is not. So the only thing I'm curious about is if Sherlock is going to see her again for the rest of the season, or if that cutting her hair off and changing her name was just like a way to get her. It's like, oh, haha, get it? She's James Bonde, da-da, and then get her out of the picture for the rest of the season. I hope that's not the case, because I like Irene's character. I really think her and Sherlock have a cool dynamic, and she's kind of a weird middle ground between Moriarty and Sherlock. I'm like, girl, you could be the wingman to get Sherlock and Moriarty together. So I'm curious to see if we'll actually see her in this episode or the next couple of episodes or not, if they're going to continue with her story, or if she's just going to kind of fade away for the rest of the season. I hope that's not the case. I hope that they actually use her to kind of infiltrate, because she's kind of like Fred. But then that's the other thing. She's kind of like Fred. She has the whole acting thing, and so does Fred. So I'm like, do we sacrifice Fred to get more Irene, or them having a similar set of infiltrating traits? How does that work? So I don't know, but I really like the opening 3-act arc that we had to start us out in the second cour. I'm really curious to see where this whole Phantom of Whitechapel thing goes. I don't know. At this point, Mycroft's like, okay, I guess you guys can do whatever you want as long as you don't get out of hand. So just let them do what they want. I'm like, okay, cool. Got very much Bungo Stray Dogs, Maury, and the Special Ops vibe from the Dark Age arc in that last episode. But if you've not watched Bungo Stray Dogs, you need to. But I digress. So I'm really curious to see what happens in this episode. And I've waited for a couple days. I've had to record ahead, but I've waited a couple days being like, I'm going to just wait and let it all sink in with episode 14. And now I'm ready. Now I'm ready to see, because I'm kind of, this second cour has gone off on a great foot. I'm excited to see what happens next. So let's do this, shall we? We're going to start episode 15 of Moriarty the Patriot here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Ha! This is a really good episode. I really liked this episode. There's a lot to talk about here. Okay, so we have, in this red light district, we have Jack the Ripper, but it's not Jack the Ripper like you think it's going to be. It could possibly be more than one person, but someone or some group is committing these murders in this district, and it's mainly prostitutes. And so the people in the town, I like that there's this kind of like civil unrest. So the people in the district are like, well, why are the police stepping in? They won't help us, or they don't care about us until now. So why would we want their help? We'll find the killer. So I like that there's this little kind of like this riot going on. I love the transition of the murder that the cop finds to being an illustration. Really cool. There's a lot of great visual things happening in this episode, like the reds, the colors, obviously red and green, again, put on display, especially with old William Moriarty. But yeah, so again in Whitechapel. So that's where our incident is taking place. I love the concept that this one man, Jack Renfield, has been training. He was the one that took in William Lewis and Albert after the house burnt down and they were orphaned. And he took them in, and they asked him to train them to kill people. It's like, okay. And he trained Moran. And that's how, I love the connections. That's how it's like 6 degrees of, Jack the Ripper. It's how William got connected with Fred and Moran, because they were taught by the same person too. So I like the idea that they want to find out who this killer is. Why are they using Jack's moniker as Jack the Ripper? Why are they borrowing that name? And when they find him, they want to figure out if he knows the same martial arts style that was taught to them by him, then they'll know that he's one of Jack's students. But if not, then I like that they're trying to make a connection, because part of this is to clear Jack's name. because he was a former British officer. It's like, okay, all right, that I like that we get this connection developed between William, because I wondered, I'm like, how did William meet Moran and Fred? Did he just find them on the streets? What's the connection? And this Rentfield guy seems to be the link between them all. But yeah, so obviously I think that the robbers in the bank, I agree with Lewis and Fred that was all set up to get them all to bond with Bonde. I think that was the whole point. Because Fred notices that the robbers, he's like, they look kind of like robbers I know before that, William knows. And Lewis is like, well, it would make sense. My brother would do something like that. William would set it up to where we had this bonding moment, stopping a robbery. Sure. And I like that the idea is that they have to make it seem like they didn't do it so that Sherlock doesn't get involved. They're trying to commit these crimes without Sherlock getting involved because he doesn't need to be there. He'll put a wrench in the plan. So I like that they have to kind of do something unexpected, like disrobe them and tie them up and blame it on the cop because the cop's wanting the promotion. He ain't gonna say anything and be like, oh, it wasn't me. It must have been some other group. Nah, he's good. They totally got out of that. I'm really glad that Bonde isn't out of the picture. I'm like, okay, cool. Irene Adler may be dead, but Bonde lives on and is still a part of the story. That fascinates me. It fascinates me because I'm like, if Sherlock ever sees Bonde, are they gonna know it's Irene? I mean, and in the OP, I love it shows Irene reaching for the picture of, and it includes Jack in the OP too now. Interesting. Okay. So yeah, I love this episode. There's so much going on. But Moran, I love that Moran, old Bonde's moving in on Moran's territory. Moran is still Kuro Daddy. I mean, I like the haircut that old Moran dons. I like the haircut. But Bonde pulls off a very convincing man and is like the playboy that all the girls like, oh my gosh. Like, of course, pulls it off. It shouldn't be surprising, right? I mean, Bonde could pull off being a king during the previous episode, so why should we be surprised? But I like that Fred is totally chill in this scene. Fred is totally chill with Bonde coming in. It's Moran, who's the womanizer, that's like, a woman in my quarters? No! And I actually really love this scene for being as progressive as it is for this time period. And then Moran's like, you're a woman, stay out of here. And Moran's hair almost looks greener later than the episode. In this first scene, his hair doesn't look as green. And then when it's cut shorter, it kind of does. It's interesting. And then I love that Bonde comes in and is like, nah, I'm using this room. Cheers. Here we go. Here I am. And I love that Moran's like, no, Lewis, do something about this. Absolutely not. And Lewis is just like, huh? Lewis is like, Mr. Bonde is a man now, so I don't see the problem. It's like, look at you, Lewis. Look at you being progressive. Ahead of your time. Yeah. And Bonde is like, here's the thing. Bonde is like, Bonde as Irene was an actress. So if you've ever been in theater or if you've ever been in any production, you're used to, like, I feel like if you've ever been in a theater performance before, you're used to dressing rooms. And even though most dressing rooms are like not co-ed, there's something about it. Like I've been in lots of plays in college and high school, and there's just something about it. You just kind of like, it's just like, even though there's not co-ed dressing rooms, you're totally, I know when I was in theater, you get totally used to seeing guys and girls dress and undress and get costume changes, everything. It's just part of theater. So you kind of just get used to it and it's not a big deal. And so I feel like Bonde in this moment's like, I'm a man. I'd like you to treat me like a man. It's no big deal. Don't worry, I'm not attracted to you. I feel like that in that moment, Bonde's like, I'm not attracted to you, Moran. It's totally fine. I'm more into the mystery sexual type, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I just like that. And Moran is like, no. It's a big hurdle for Moran to jump through. And they're like, there are other issues. And Bonde's like, oh no, I'm pretty confident I can pass as a guy. Don't worry. And Moran tries to be a little bit like, you can kind of get where Moran's coming from, because Moran is used to being in the situation where he is the strength, the brawn, and Moran's like, oh, dear damsel, you're going to be in missions where you're going to be, your strength isn't going to be the same as a man's. And I love that Bonde's just like, pops the heel there right beside his face, like does not care as our ripped Kuro Daddy is just sitting there in barely a towel. It's like, nah. Bonde's like, you don't quit. If you're this dead set on not recognizing me as a man, then I love this scene. Shall we put it to the test, Moran? And Moran's like, ah! And like immediately goes behind Lewis. What do you mean put it to the test? I love it. And then William's like, I like that anytime William shows up and it's a surprising situation, William puts on such a persona around Sherlock and around others, where William has this persona of being like this sly fox and this like the criminal consultant. But in this moment when William just shows up and is like, what's the fuss? Like, he just genuinely looks like a normal person, and it's kind of amazing. And then like, what's going on? Moran's like, listen to this nonsense. And then Bonde's like, I just want to use this room. And William's like, yeah, I don't see what the problem is. I love it. Like, are you saying that you have some issue with a fellow man? I love that William and Lewis are just like totally on board. Like, well, Bonde says they're a man now, so why are we going to treat him any different? And Moran's like, this is a lot. This is a lot to take in. I love it. I kind of love it. And the best part is that by the end of this, Moran does bond with Bonde. And that's kind of the great thing. Like, at first, Moran's like, you've just got William and everybody wrapped around your little finger. And Bonde's like, well, what's it going to take for you to acknowledge me as being part of the team? And Moran's like, I don't want to just acknowledge you. I just want you to prove that you're useful. And it's like, And I like that little eye twitch, like, okay, like you're patronizing me. I get it. Bonde's like, all right, I'm fine. I'll have to prove myself. And the great thing is that when they're in the vault, later on, when they're in the vault, the idea is that Moran's issue isn't necessarily that Bonde is able to do things. It's like the whole group, the organization, thinks on their toes, and they all take initiative to get the job done. So they try to just think independently to find, they're not a group of followers just following William's lead. They have to think on their own and come up with their own strategy. They can't just, William doesn't just lay out the entire plan for them and say, okay, follow A, B, and C steps. He gives them like a rundown, but they also have to be able to think on their own. And Moran's kind of telling Bonde that, like, are you going to be able to think on your own? Can you take initiative, or are you just going to rely on us everywhere? Because otherwise you're probably going to die. Because we're going to have to get split apart. We've got to take initiative. And I think that Bonde, once that moment happens, Bonde's like, oh, so that's how this is going to be. And then takes the initiative, and it all ends up working out. Because at that point, Bonde's like, okay, well, then this is what we have to do. Because Bonde's smart. Like, Irene Adler, Bonde, they are smart individuals, just like William and Sherlock. They're able to deduce a lot of things. And I think that kind of sways Moran over, seeing just how much like Moriarty Bonde is. I think that helps to sway Moran in the end. And I love the fact that Moran gives him the flask, gives Bonde the flask at the end. I love that. I love that Moran's like, it's like a sign of being a man. Like, all right, fine, you can have some of this whiskey. And Bonde's like, all right, cool. And then just chug. I'd be the same thing. I'm kind of a whiskey drinker, so I'd be like, okay, sure, cool, can do. I love it. So this whole thing, Bonde questions it like Will's having a nap. And Moran says it's like a reaction he has after overexerting his mind. He just doesn't wake up for anything. He gets like super exhausted after overexerting himself and has to take a nap. That's a little concerning. It's just a weird thing to just pop out of nowhere, like, okay. And there's part of me that's like, was it a little bit exaggerated this time around to get them all to work together? Maybe, because as soon as Renfield gets in and is like squeezing his cheek, he like, it pops up like a daisy like 5 seconds later once they all arrive back into the room. So that's curious. I'm like, did William just make that up so that they could leave and leave him alone? I'm not sure. It's interesting because he just passes out right then and there. Huh. It's very curious. So yeah, they end up doing the whole scene with the cops. And then we have the scene with Moran and Bonde, and at the end, they all solve everything. It's great. I love it. And then we get the whole Jack Renfield thing coming in. The true Jack the Ripper, saying they worked in the Afghan War, all that stuff. So yeah, oh my God. Going back to their past as kids, it's kind of terrifying. Little baby William, where he's like, I use my powers of observation. It's like, aww. And he's like, you're a crackerjack soldier who served in Afghanistan. And then Jack's like, how did he know that? Like, through observation, what is he talking about? My research shows that you earned the nickname Jack the Ripper. It's like, oh, this little tiny William. It's kind of cute. But then it goes from being cute to then being like, he's like, what feeble request? I like his eyes are red. So there's that red symbolism. He's like, what sort of request would you make of this feeble old man who was not very, he wasn't as old then as he is now. And then Albert coming in. Albert as a kid, I forget how deep his voice is for like a 13-year-old. I'm like, God, Albert, your voice dropped real quick. He's like, for us to be able to survive on our own hereafter, we would like for you to teach us how to protect ourselves. And he's like, to survive on your own, because yeah, they're not planning on staying there. They're going to start their own place, right? And Albert, I love that there's Albert with the green eyes, and Lewis has the red eyes, and then so does William. They all, and their eyes have that like darkness and still that glow to it. And he's like, oh. Jack's like, oh, what? And then they just, the murder face is like, oh my God, Albert and William have like the little smile on their face, like, teach us to kill someone. It's like, what? And then William's the only one who's not smiling, and he has a little scar on his cheek. He's like, whew. He's like, I'll teach whatever you will need to protect yourselves. Or rather, more accurately speaking, I'll teach you how to kill a man. And I like this Jack guy just is totally chill with teaching these kids how to kill someone. Totally, just no worries. Butler's like, will do. It's totally fine. And yeah, William looks so like, okay, cool. It's like, it's so dark. It's really so dark. But yeah, the maestro taught us all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. It's because of him that we are who we are. Moran and Fred included. Yeah, Moran's rocking that hairdo. I'm liking it. And little Fred. And I like that Bonde's like, really? Is that so? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just very, very fascinating with all of this. And so yeah, then we have the whole vigilante, Scotland Yard getting involved. I like that we're establishing that Lestrade, the town is a battlefield. So, okay, theory time, these bloody pests. Antherton, who is the head of Scotland Yard, is Antherton the serial killer or one of the serial killers? Don't spoil me, obviously, but I'm going to make a prediction that Antherton is part of this, because Antherton seems really gung-ho about them stopping the vigilantes, as he calls them, and not focusing on the murders, because Antherton's like, who cares if some whores get killed? And it's like, well, the townspeople do, and they're starting this riot because he says that y'all don't, and if you guys go after the vigilante crew instead of the murders, then it's just going to prove their point, and they're just going to start a riot anyway and lead to violence, and you all have to use excessive force. So it almost seems like Antherton's spurning it on, like instead of focusing on the murders like they should be doing, and trying to help the civilians, he's just making it more agitated. So Antherton has some red flags for me. I'm like, yeah, no. And then, of course, Lestrade tries to say the safety of the citizens should be our priority, because Lestrade is a white knight. He's a knight in shining armor. And we see Paterson right behind him. He's like, Lestrade's like, I think we should continue our focus on efforts of arresting this criminal. And Antherton is like, nope, that's not how things go around here. It makes no difference how many of those poors get killed. It's like, God. No wonder they're vigilantes. So yeah, they just want to try to stop an uprising, but it's like, and he brings up Bloody Sunday, which I like that they're tapping into some historical events that have happened. But it's like, if you don't catch the murderer, then it's not going to help. That's what they're trying to do, is find the murderer. And so if you catch the murderer, that might help curb the vigilantes, right? Yeah. It's just, give disarming the vigilante committee your priority. And everybody says, sir, except Lestrade. Lestrade's the only one that's like, nah, I'm not for it. So I'm curious, because I'm like, yeah, if Patterson, I think it's Paterson because it's one T. If Paterson is knowing Lestrade is not on board, I wonder if Paterson is the person on the inside that's going to meet up with Bonde. I'm thinking that might be the case, right? Yeah, and then I like that Lestrade's like, I'm going to step away for about an hour. Do you care to handle any emergencies that might come up? And Paterson's like, of course, we're chums, aren't we? Yeah, I think Paterson's going to meet up with Bonde, and I think Lestrade's going to go get Sherlock. That's going to muck up the situation even more, bringing Sherlock in. Like, Lestrade's going to be like, okay, if we solve the crimes now, we can stop this from getting any worse. So I feel like Lestrade's going to go get Sherlock to help him solve the crime. Paterson is the inside person that's going to meet up with Bonde. The question is, does Paterson know that Lestrade is going to find Sherlock or not? We don't know that. I'm guessing that's the case, but we don't know for sure. Yeah, and it's just... Oh, God. And then there's William in that bloody sunset. Yep. Reading over some investigative reports from an inside man from the yard. You and he will likely be working together before long. Yeah, I feel like Paterson is the inside person. I feel like that's the case. Which, if they're chums with Lestrade, it's this tangled web. It's interesting. And so, yeah, then William says they seem fixated on this case as the work of a single psychotic killer, but I am clearly able to see the full scope of these killings. And you see, I love the symbolism of behind Moriarty is the rubble of the city and that dang red sun. Like, yeah. That we're going to show these phony Jack the Rippers, like there's multiple ones, who the real devils around this town are. And the wind blowing and the red in his eyes and it's glowing. Very demonic. Very devils indeed. Oh, I like it. I like it a lot. Okay. All right. Yeah, I really liked this episode. I liked the whole thing of Moran and Bonde bonding. I liked Bonde integrating into the group. I like the idea that there's multiple killers possibly, that it's not just, we know it's Jack the Ripper, but it's not Jack the Ripper as we think it is. It's something different. It's a twist. Lestrade stepping up his game. Probably going to go get Sherlock. This Paterson guy that I think is the inside man for Moriarty. Interesting. And I think Atherton's behind it all. I think that that's the case. But this was a really good episode. And I'm really excited for part 2 now. So I'm curious to know what you all thought about this episode. Obviously no spoilers. But I'm very curious to see what happens next. So I am curious to hear your comments down below. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 16 of Moriarty the Patriot. Bye.